Alright, this is my rather beautiful looking prized Marshall 18 watt, well, clone, highly modified clone. It's a single 1x12 combo. It's got the red, white, and gold theme going for it. This cabinet, I might add, is not mine. I did not make this. I'm not that good. This is custom made from Sour Mash guitar cabs. It's just a single 1x12. Not awfully thick. It's not awfully thick, but it gets the job done. It makes it a whole lot less heavy than, like a giant 4x12 or something. Alright. Yep, it's got a Celestion inside of it, G12H. Got two outputs there. There's a gain switch I added. Instead of it having a tremolo channel and a normal channel, what I've gone and done is I've added a treble middle bass tone stack and a master volume back here, if it will focus. And, as per standard Marshall theme, it's got the standby on-off switch. It's got some Soviet EL84s in it right now. Go ahead and take it out and show you. So this is the actual circuit, just the amp itself out of the combo there. So EZ81, the Russian equivalents of EL84s. They're not actually EL84s, but they're spec'd to be the same. These are 12AX7s in the preamp section there. Now what I've gone and done is I've added in extra sockets to accommodate 6v6 tubes, as you can kind of see there. And the EL84s will make about 17 watts, and the 6v6s maybe make 11 watts-ish. So decidedly less, but also a lot less gain than you'd normally get. And it has a nice clean sound, a nice kind of Fender sound to it. I'm going to turn it around here. And unfortunately, it got cracked. Apparently drilling into acrylic is not a good idea. But luckily you don't see this side of it too often. You got the selector. This transformer has taps on it. Pretty standard stuff, really. This is a gain switch I've added. So that in the preamp section has slightly more or less gain. I'll show you the circuit here momentarily. Okay, so actually before I go any further, I think I'll mention that I originally got this amp, or most of the parts anyway, as a kit from Triode Electronics. They sell amp kits anywhere from Fenders and 5E3s in this 18 watt amp too. So I bought that. It didn't come with a chassis or anything like that. I bought the chassis and the faceplates and all that on eBay, and the cab, like I said, from Sour Mash guitar cabs. But it was already a modified version. It was the TMB version, or the treble middle bass version, as opposed to the normal original tremolo version. And I think that was a worthwhile mod. It certainly has a much wider tone palette with the TMB mod. So I've gone and made other mods to this thing too. The original schematic I have up here, actually I used a Tube Depot schematic, but it's close enough. It's just got the tremolo in there. You have your input stage for the normal channel or for the tremolo channel, and through a little tone stack or whatever to the phase inverter. And one side of the phase inverter feeds in the normal, and the other side feeds in the tremolo, or in this case the TMB, as I'll show you later. Normally, that other side of the phase inverter is connected either as a feedback loop to the output stage, or it's just grounded. So this is an interesting amp layout. But this also means if you want both channels, you can't have feedback in this amp, which is a little bit troubling. It reduces your headroom a little bit, and that's why this amp is kind of a one-trick pony when it comes to now, my revised schematic, until recently, I've never actually gone and drawn up a schematic because I've just referenced other ones that are slightly different and just cobbled it together. But I thought I'd, for clarity, actually go and draw one. So basically, it's mostly the same. Power supply is standard, except the other end of that phase inverter is connected to the TMB stage. Now that uses one of the sides of the input tubes, and then it's cascaded into another gain stage, and then that one into a cathode follower, which drives the tone stack, and that in turn goes into a master volume control, which goes into the phase inverter. So it's not a post phase inverter master volume, which is the best sounding type but hardest to implement. But it's all preamp. So any distortion you get from that master volume is all preamp. It's not as good sounding, but it's better than not having it, I'll tell you that much. Normally you have the first input tube, like there's 2 triodes in the 12AX7, you have both of those for both channels of the input stage. Instead, it's just a single tube feeding in both the high and low gain inputs, and then the other half of that tube is used on the TMB channel. Now, also what I've done is I've shown you the octal sockets I put in there so that it will accommodate 6v6s, or actually any tube with that pinout. Now, the 6v6s have less transconductance than the EL84s do, and this is why you get decidedly less gain, and it's a little darker sounding, but it sounds almost like a Fender. It's not as clean as a Fender, but it's a totally different sound, and it can help if you want some variety. But it doesn't make as much power, though. It's not running into its optimal 5K impedance. This transformer is an 8K primary impedance, or higher. It's like 8 or 9K. Now, originally, I'd gone in and dropped the size of these grid leak resistors here because I was getting some nasty kind of blocking distortion going on with the output. And it did clean it up a little bit, but it also dropped the gain, and so I ended up putting it back. It does depend quite a bit on what EL84s you have in here. Some of them can sound quite harsh, almost like that kind of dentist drill sound, and it's worse when you attenuate it too. If it's wide open, you don't notice it as much. The 6v6s don't hardly have that at all, and I think that's why people prefer them in most amps. It's just because by their nature, they don't do that. So yeah, I'll move on to how the circuit works more in detail. Alright, so now I'm going to take you through each section of this amplifier and show you kind of how each thing works. I might do videos later explaining more in depth on how to design these things and, you know, the total ins and outs, but I'll just show you the overview now. So the first thing is the power supply. If you don't have this, nothing works. So basically, what you have to have is a transformer that provides power to the filaments of the tubes. In this case, it's 6.3 volts for the signal tubes and 6.3 volts for the rectifier, although a lot of times it's 5 volts for the rectifier. Now, there's what's called a high tension or high voltage winding, which in this case is, and it's center tapped in the middle. That goes out to the rectifier. It's set up as a full wave rectifier with 2 diodes, not the bridge type, but it's a full wave with the older full wave, I should say. That goes into a filtering capacitor, a resistor, and then another filtering capacitor, and then that is piped straight into the output stage. And there will be a bit of hum, like the filtering will not be perfect, but the push-pull action of the EL84s will cancel out a lot of the hum, and you won't hardly notice it. Plus, the incoming hum from the input's going to swamp that anyway, but details. More filtering, and then there's a filter section for the phase splitter, and one for the preamp stages. Now, the preamp stages are where the signal comes in through the jacks, and these are pretty standard setups. They are 12AX7 tubes, basically just high-gain triodes. Specifically designed for this, actually. Biased so that I think they give probably a gain of like 70-ish. I'd have to do the math on that, but that's usually about it. It goes into a tone control, a single tone control in the normal channel there, and then the volume. And so that volume comes right after the first preamp stage, and that directly feeds the phase splitter. or the phase inverter, as some call it. There are different ways to make phase inverters. This is one of them. It's called a long-tailed pair or differential pair. You see this a lot with transistors, but it works great with tubes as well. Those feed the EL84s directly. One gets the in-phase signal, one gets the out-of-phase, so each one's driving half the signal. One gets the top half, one gets the bottom half, and in the transformer, they get combined. And then that transformer couples out to the speaker, and the speaker plugs into one of those jacks. Now, the TMB channel has an extra gain stage added to it. It's got the normal preamp, and then it's got another volume control as per normal, and then you have another gain stage with a variable gain switch. That bypass cap, like in transistor circuits, will give you more gain. If you engage it or not, it'll give you more gain at higher frequencies. That couples over to a cathode follower. Now, if you remember, an emitter follower in transistor circuits will give you low output impedance. Well, it's the exact same thing with tubes. With the cathode follower, it will drive the tone stack, the treble middle bass tone stack. That tone stack then feeds the master volume, which I forgot to write on there. That's a 1 mega ohm audio master volume. That feeds into the phase splitter, and you get the same result. Now, one thing I should mention about this kit, this triode kit that I bought, is that the potentiometers were not audio potentiometers. If you're going to build something like this, at least for the volume controls, usually the tone knobs too, you want to have audio pots. Now, what does that mean? Well, you want to have a linear potentiometer. As you turn it up, the resistance increases linearly. But with an audio pot, it increases logarithmically. If you don't have a logarithmic pot, all the changes will happen within like 5 degrees of turning it. And so it's very hard to use. And that was the case on mine. And there's ways to help that. There's ways to get around it if you only have linear pots. I'll explain that in another video. But yeah, that's basically how this thing works.